apologize for that. I'm Dana Caulfield. I'm the editor of the Colorado Sun, which is a nonprofit newsroom that's trying to help Colorado understand itself a little bit better. And that for us means visiting communities, like the communities that run along US 50 and the Arkansas River, to understand policies and implications and explain it in a way that people who don't live here understand. So I wanted to thank you, so many of you, for showing up. It's a big deal. We weren't sure, and we appreciate that you showed up in this way, because we've been trying to show up for you and making sure that your story gets told outside of your immediate community. We've been talking a lot about how folks in this corridor feel like perhaps their concerns go unheard and that they go unseen. And we feel like y'all have been really generous to us by giving people the chance to care for what's going on here by sharing your stories. That's one of our big missions here tonight, is to both share some of the work that we have done over the last 4 or 5 years, and also hear from you what your concerns are. I have a list of things I'm supposed to be doing here. Sorry. Critically, well, I am super happy that you all showed up. I think a lot of the showing up is the result of some of the great work by our presenting sponsors, which include Aurora Water, Colorado Springs Utilities, the Lower Arkansas Valley Water Conservation District, our friends from the Rocky Mountain Farmers Union. You met Zach, don't forget to sign up for his newsletter out in the lobby, the Colorado Water Center at Colorado State University. And we'd also like to thank our friends at Adams State University for helping to sponsor today's event. It's going to be formal and yet casual. I know many of you submitted questions when you signed up, but you may have developed a new question, and hopefully you have a question card to write that down on, and if you don't, we can walk around and hand you a piece of paper. When you're done with your questions, hand them out to the end, and I will be on this side, and Jess Mills will be on the other side, and we'll get them up to our fabulous moderator, Mike Booth, who will be helping moderate the formal panel after we hear from our friend Mike Sweeney about his photographic work in the Valley in the past 3 years. So, Mike Booth.
Thanks, everyone, for being here. We really are excited about the great turnout that we've got. And in this beautiful spot, it's a beautiful movie theater, and we're really glad that you all have this community location and community art and entertainment center to see each other on weekends and hang out, and sometimes just sit in the dark and see a great movie and eat popcorn. Lots of arguments about what the best snack is. Everybody has a right to their own snack. We prefer Twizzlers. We've got a couple of extra packs of Twizzlers for the brave people who are going to be the first to step up to the microphone and ask questions in person. You can leave with a lovely parting gift. My name's Michael Booth. I'm the environment writer for the Colorado Sun, and spent a lot of time writing about water, air pollution, open space, public lands. We have a staff, most of whom cover all those topics as well, because we try to cover every inch of the state. Our mission at the Sun, we believe that people who have better information make better decisions, whether that's in their personal lives or in their public policy lives. And so it's our job as a nonpartisan, nonprofit news site to bring as much information as possible in as entertaining and engaging a way as possible, because then it will stick with people and they'll actually remember it. We have a panel coming up with great representation from Colorado Springs Utilities, from Aurora Water, from local farming, from the local Water Conservancy District, and we are going to get to that. But first we wanted to talk about what brought us here in the first place, which was a series that we did at the Sun through much of 2025 about the Arkansas River. Why did we choose the Arkansas? There are 6 million people in Colorado now. We want to get to all 6 million of those individual stories. It's going to take a while, but we have missions to get there. We also believe that people in Colorado have to think more about both geography and climate and their sense of place more than in other states. I grew up in Minnesota, spent a lot of time in Maryland, where my wife is from. They don't have to think about water. It's just there. In fact, they have too much of it. They'd probably like to get rid of some of it. And we forget in Colorado that we have to think about water all the time. It's our most precious resource. I was talking with some people ahead of time who said it's like if you have oil in the Middle East. It's the main thing you've got and the main thing everybody fights over. And so we plan to profile every inch of water in the state as well, by kayak, by bike, by hiking, by flyovers, by drone, as Mike will show you. We write a lot about the Colorado River because there's obviously huge issues going on. As there's less water in that river, 40 million people downstream who depend on water from the Colorado River. It gets enough ink. We will continue to write about it. We write a lot about the South Platte, of course, because it goes through the main metro area and the biggest metro area. We wanted to look at the Arkansas from start to finish, 350 miles through Colorado. We wanted to profile it. We wanted to talk to all the communities that depend on it, that have used it, that have changed it, and the river has changed them over the decades, and ask questions of the river itself. Who changed you? When did you start changing? When do you want to finish changing? How can we help you? Do you not want help as a river? Do you want us to just leave you alone? And different questions and different answers from all the communities along the way. So we did that with our What is a River series, and Mike Sweeney, the great photographer who helped us with most of the photographs on that series, is going to talk about some of the images, all the communities along the way, especially you all, and then we'll get to the panel after that. A couple of things first that get to the theme of what I mentioned, that people in Colorado have to think about water in a way that's different from other states. Some basic facts that we think everybody should know if they're going to talk about it in Colorado and think about it. 100th meridian runs through the middle of Kansas and Oklahoma. West of the 100th meridian, there's not enough water that falls naturally to reliably grow crops and support people. So you got to move the water around. It takes about 13 to 15 inches of rain and precipitation overall to grow wheat. It takes 44 inches of rain and precipitation to grow alfalfa. Pass a lot of alfalfa on the drive out here. That has implications for what Colorado does with its water. A couple of other basic numbers. 80% of the people live east of the Continental Divide in Colorado. 80% of the available water in a given year falls west of the Continental Divide. So again, you have to move things around. About 90% of the water in Colorado that's available in a given year is used for agriculture. And before everybody gets their back up and thinks, well, you know, easy for you to say, I was talking to a northeastern farmer last week from the Akron area, and he pointed out, guess what percentage of Coloradans eat food? That falls at about 100%. So put that 90% in perspective. About 7% of water in a given year is used by cities, and about half of that is used to water lawns. So you can say that's a lot. It does turn out to be a lot of gallons. But if you're going to cut, if the Supreme Court says to us at some point, you need to send more water down the river to California and Arizona, or you need to fulfill a compact with Kansas and Nebraska and stop taking water out of the Ogallala and put more water in the Republican River, where is that water going to come from? You could tell everybody they can't have lawns anymore and rip it all out, but it's not enough. You need to go where the water is. And so that's why we end up talking a lot about agriculture and how water gets used. And so that's part of what we're here to talk about today. We've got Rob Oquist, one of your county commissioners, who's given his time to us, and longtime resident and business owner and family business owner, and knows everybody up and down the county, up and down the river. And we've got Rick Kienitz from the Aurora Water and other people from Aurora Water in the audience, and also from Colorado Springs Utilities in the audience. We appreciate you all coming out to talk to us today. Jack Goble from the Conservancy District is on his way, maybe walking in as we speak, from an issue that we're going to be talking about that was happening up in Denver today about revegetation. And we'll get to that in just a second. First, let's have a little bit of an update on what conditions are like. I was shoveling 6 inches of snow in my yard in Denver yesterday. And I know you all got some rain out here, much needed and much anticipated. But Mike, could you start us off by talking a little bit about what conditions are looking like for growing this season, what we're worried about. It was a record low snowpack in a lot of Colorado.
Sure thing. Happy to do that. Can you guys hear me okay? You know, I kind of feel inadequate talking about what it is from a perspective of a farmer because I still get an income regardless of that. So I want to qualify that by saying I think there's some incredible stressors going on in agriculture. You know, we know there's no snowpack, but it's stacked up against a very other significant things that are happening in agriculture. You know, we've got obviously high prices like diesel, 30% increase in fertilizer prices. We've got extremely low commodity prices. We've got things happening in traditionally the entities like USDA, the NRCS, and the FD, Farm Service Agency. They're traditionally supported that. Those are really not functioning or cut back. So we've got a tremendous amount of stressors happening on a national level. And then here locally, we've also got some additional stressors, you know, where we're looking at incredibly troublesome regulations when it comes to food safety, labor, and all those things. And I think that's putting an incredible amount of stress on that. And then on top of that is that uncertainty that you have of whether you're going to be able to grow all that. And I particularly feel for some of the younger farmers. We have an incredible amount of younger farmers here. And so they're trying to get started in this industry. They maybe have some debt and some other payments to make, and to have that along with it. So again, there's just an incredible amount of stressors that I've never seen in certainly my career. And again, I feel inadequate because I think most people don't understand agriculture. You're not only your job, but you're holding up the weight of sometimes multiple generations. You're supporting multiple families. And I think that's something that most people in the general public don't understand. So it's a pretty significantly dire situation, and I'm thoroughly worried about, you know, how we're going to come through this in the future. So,
Kim, do you want to talk about what your supplies are looking like for the year and what you all are doing to conserve and make sure that there's enough to get you through the year and prepare for future years?
So we're facing about 47% of our average kind of yield that we tend to have. But I was talking with folks today, and I just wanted to also, like, out of that 47% though, a lot of that is actually reuse. So that's water that we've kind of used, put in storage, and are reusing. A lot of our customers' demands are dropping, and so that gives us that ability to reuse that water that they don't use, store it, and use it during a time like this. I think this is one of those times where, you know, storage is kind of the message. Fortunately, our forefathers were planting a lot, and there's a lot of storage in our system because we didn't have direct diversions off of the river. So storage was how we got through these low years, only being able to divert for short periods out of the year and having to serve demands for the full year. And so, you know, we're getting our customers prepared for the fact that we're going to be using a lot of storage this year. They're on restrictions, but they're on permanent restrictions. And so this is the first drought that we're really going into where those permanent restrictions have been in place and will continue to be in place. And we're preparing that next year it may look even a little different. We might have to go into deeper restrictions as we tap into that storage and continue to try to weather through that, because we just don't know what next year would look like. And of course, we want to continue to assess, you know, are we going to have 2 years back to back? That's kind of one of the biggest risks for municipalities too, is to have multiple years back to back of low yield, so that we keep drawing on that storage. So that's kind of where we're preparing.
Rick is the basin manager that includes the Arkansas for Aurora and also grew up here. So he's got multiple perspectives on it. Rick, what's Aurora's supply looking like, and what are you all doing to conserve and do your share?
Yeah, so as you said, my name is Rick Kienitz. I did grow up here, and so Rocky Ford is my home community, and water has not always been forefront in my mind. but I've always known that it was a scarce commodity, and so for the city of Aurora, we get about 25% of our water from the Colorado Basin, 25 from the Arkansas Basin, and the rest from the South Platte, which is where Aurora is. But that diversity at times works in our favor, and at times it doesn't. And so we are facing some pretty short and a pretty bleak outlook for 2026. But we're attacking that with conservation. We're attacking it with restrictions. The city of Aurora right now is in stage 1 restrictions, which means 2 days a week watering and outdoor watering, and some other cutbacks that Aurora is doing. And as Ken said, cities have to now look at reuse, and all of our water is that comes from both of the basins that I'm in charge of is completely put down to consumptive use. And so we use that water to extinction. We use it, reuse it, and reuse it again. And I know many cities do that, and we have to. And so that's what the city is doing. What the city has put in. I mean, we are always under restrictions, and since the beginning of the century, we've instituted restrictions that have never come off, and so we take that part of that very seriously. And what that does is as we get more and more efficient with our water sources and with how we use our water, the reservoir of conservation becomes smaller and smaller. So we have to work harder and harder, and we're continuing to do that, and work harder and harder at conservation. We put in a lot of restrictions and a lot of programs to keep our and drive our water consumptive. The water that we use, we drive that down, and so that's kind of where the city is. We are facing a water short year, and it's hard. It's a hard message to say to people that live in the city, but it's needed, and it's just as hard as it is here, I think. So.
Rob, what would you? Jack's here, fresh from legislative action, which we'll talk about in a minute. So appreciate you coming. I hope you didn't get any speeding tickets on the way. Maybe you could expense them if you did. Rob, tell us, what do you want people in Denver, where Jack just came from, to know about the water situation down here, the agriculture situation, and the community situation in terms of the importance of water, and whether there is help that the state can bring to make sure that people continue doing what they want to do down here?
Sure. Well, I first of all appreciate all the farmers out here. I've lived here my whole life, and I've seen it from the time when we had pretty much all the water that we needed. It was the ditches were full to where the point is 2 weeks ago, I drove to Pueblo, and the irrigation ditches, there was no water in them. That's the first time I've seen that in my life living here. What I want to make sure that they know up in the Denver area and Colorado Springs is that we all need to work together in this. I mean, it's not a situation where it's just the Arkansas Valley. Everybody's going to struggle because there's not enough water, and there's not going to be for a few years. So we've all got to work together to try and make this work. I see the farmers now, like I say, 20 years ago, everybody was running down the irrigation ditches and putting out their tubes, and now it's all planted underneath underneath plastic. They're conserving water. It really is something, everything that they've come up with now here in the valley to help conserve water. And we're doing it, and I know that Colorado Springs and Denver is doing everything that they can, but we've got to still keep figuring out how to do more, because there's just getting to be less and less water.
So one of the things that Jack has been working on, and he can explain to us, Jack Goble from the Lower Arkansas Valley Water Conservancy District, revegetation. Jack, if you could take a minute to explain what that even is, why it's important to the counties around you here, and what you've been pushing for to get some relief through the legislature and some changes through the legislature about how that's done.
Yeah, thank you. And can folks hear me okay? Okay. Yeah, apologize for being late. Like Michael said, was at the Capitol, and that was the fastest I've ever made it from Lyman to Rocky Ford. And sorry, Commissioner Nabenshu, former state trooper. And on a donut, no less, because I had a flat tire in Denver. So those things are rated for 45 miles an hour, but I can guarantee that you can go faster. Anyway, thanks for having me. And happy to say that our bill passed out of the Senate Ag Committee and already made its way through the House, the full House. Yeah, thank you. And so now it's on its way to the entire Senate, and then hopefully a couple of good votes there and onto the governor's desk. So for those of the folks that are in the valley or familiar with it, you know the struggles of revegetation. And what I'm talking about specifically is when we permanently dry up a piece of farmland, what happens to that land? And particularly, it becomes difficult whenever you've been irrigating it for 130, 150 years and it changes the soil chemistry. It's not like if you go plow up your pasture and then try to reseed it. It's a totally different thing. And so it's very difficult and very expensive to do. And we've made big improvements over the years, but what we wanted to do is learn from what's worked in the past and try to codify that into state statute. So there's I won't go too far into the weeds, I guess pun intended.
No, we don't want weeds.
Yeah, but we're trying to establish basic requirements to ensure that land's protected whenever that water is removed. A couple of the big pieces of the bill are that the entity removing the water is responsible for reclaiming that land at their cost. There's an independent oversight appointed by the water court to basically evaluate how well they're doing. And then there's different mechanisms, either through financial security, performance bonds would be the most common, or water use restrictions to make sure the job gets done. And so we've been working on this for going on 2 years now, the legislation piece, and we've had, I think we were up to almost 60 stakeholders across the state of Colorado. And so it's been a lot of conversations and a lot of time and a lot of trips to Denver, but happy to say we're making good progress, and hopefully we can get it into law.
Do you feel like they are hearing you better than maybe 5 years ago? Is it more effective?
Yeah, so the folks in our part of the world, the major change cases these days, it's become precedent that there are revegetation requirements in there. They're hammered out and fought out on a case-by-case basis, and so part of this bill, we're trying to make it a more efficient process, and also look to our counties to say, what do you say is successful, and make sure the water court adopts that. But Colorado Springs, Aurora, they're both very familiar, and they have change cases that have these types of requirements in it. I say that to say what we really didn't expect was the lack of knowledge around this space throughout the rest of the state. We're unfortunately 40, 50 years ahead of the rest of the state when it comes to buy and dry. There's been little pieces here and there, but nothing to the scale. We've lost over 100,000 acres of farmland, and so nothing to that scale. And so the challenge was trying to have those conversations whenever they haven't experienced, what we have. But fortunately, the cities that are in our basin or pull water from our basin, we felt like worked with us pretty well around this. particularly Colorado Springs, you know, early on we had a little bit of disagreement, but pretty quickly came to middle ground. So that was really good, and made it a long way with Aurora as well. So yeah, I think the folks in this room at least are aware and want revegetation to occur too.
So just to let people know, the people in Metro Denver area might have heard more about a region like Thornton and Larimer County. Thornton has, when they started buying up Poudre River water and farm water in Larimer County and Weld County, they made a lot of agreements with local governments to say that when they did get around to building their pipeline and pulling it off, that they would revegetate, that they would backfill local taxes. And so Denver readers have heard about it, but it's probably from the Thornton area more than Southeast. Kim, do you want to talk a little bit about Colorado Springs Utilities' position on that bill, and also just the fact that you've tried to make it clear in different conversations that Colorado Springs doesn't do things now the way they did them. They might have done them in the 1980s. People can still disagree that they can still think that it should be done differently, but there have been a lot of changes. So do you want to talk a little bit about how you do water buys differently?
Yeah, I mean, I think first off, you know, congratulations, and you know, I think the lower district and Jack really reached out. We did work well together. We got to a point where we could be, you know, supportive of the bill moving forward, and so that engagement was very much appreciated. We appreciated that it really did respect the county's authorities on that land use control as well, and some of the work that we had been putting in over the years to develop, you know, that revegetation and other requirements that we needed to kind of keep the county whole as we were developing within the Bent County. And so, you know, I like to look at, like, these processes are about tension and balance, right? And so, yeah, what happened in the 80s and some of the choices and things that occurred within development of the past really created a tension that we needed to listen to, learn from, and try to move forward in a way that was more balanced and more respectful, more, you know, taking into consideration the values and the needs of the communities that where the water development was happening. And so through the last, you know, decade or so, we have talked with Jack in the lower district. We have talked with many farmers. We've talked with Bent County and others to try to get an idea of what is going to strike that balance. And sometimes the tension was real, and we had a lot of folks that tell us exactly what they feel about that or what they need, and tell us when we step in it. So it was a learning experience, but it was a learning experience that we needed in order to get us to a good point moving forward. Is it perfect? I don't know, right? I mean, we will continue to work through those and try to identify issues as we go, but we're trying to use the best science. We're trying to get the right people at the table to talk about that, monitor over time, and that's how we'll make better choices moving forward and be able to actually achieve the success that I think we're all actually looking for.
So I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this, but when cities do buy water resources these days, they're usually making agreements where they're not going to take the water automatically every year. They're making agreements where they're leasing it. They may only use it 5 years out of 10. Is that the agreement in some of the places?
Yeah, I mean, we have a variety of those types of agreements. And again, we're trying to, like, try a lot of different things to then maybe adaptively manage those as we move forward. So one of the first agreements was a 5 and 10. That was a lot of discussion on how was going to work with the augmentation company. And so we've done discussions about super ditch on 3 and 10 leases, and some of those things, there was some challenges to actually make those work. And so, and then we've moved into other types of agreements and projects. So.
Mike, you're shaking your head a lot, to be honest. 5 years out of 10 or 3 years out of 10? Is that an improvement?
You know, you got to understand, there's so many things that we haven't, they come up with these programs, I'm going to be honest here, you know, they come up with these programs in kind of this echo chamber, and I give them, you know, a couple of points for trying to come up with this plan, but they haven't vetted it with the best scientific methods. You know, that disrupts the soil when you have prolonged periods of fallowing. It may not even be economically possible, you know, to do that. You know, it takes forever for that soil to come back. They have to vet that with the best scientific information.
So you're saying even 1 year of
One
fouling
year is going to
can ruin the soil?
Yeah, and plus if they get to select the years, a year like this, there's not going to be a very big yield. So they're not going to select a year. So they may be saying 5 out of 10, which everybody's thinking, oh, it's 50%, but must be much higher than that. So they could be taking 70 or 80% of the water when you look at the fluctuations. You know, they're not going to want to take water in a year like this where there's no yield. They're going to take it in a year where they're going to have some yield to it. So I guess my concern with all these things is that, yeah, they're trying to come up with some solutions, but they're not thoroughly vetted under all the things. In order for these things to work, you've got to be able to mitigate them, have the best scientific information. You got to mitigate the environmental hazards, and every one of these has environmental hazards that they really have never addressed. There's economic ones, and then it's just not paying your property taxes. There's repercussions throughout the all economy. There's social repercussions as it affects young farmers and their ability to get into farming. So, you know, I'll give them a couple of points for trying, but these are useless when they're only done inside this echo chamber.
So obviously Ken or Rick, or in succession, need to give you a chance to talk about that. You guys talk a lot about all the stakeholders that get involved in these conversations, and Mike is saying you're not checking necessarily with the right people. So tell us a little bit more about how you work out what is going to be both work for your cities, but if you can make an argument that it is environmentally sound and agriculturally sound.
Yeah, well, and I'd like to just touch back to the re-veg just a little bit too. Aurora has gone through that. You know, Aurora has done some successful revegetation here in this basin. We have 4,100 acres of grassland that is being used as a cow-calf operation and very successful. And it isn't easy. It's hard. And Aurora's stance on revegetation is it needs to be done, and it's expensive. And I think that the water rights owner should have to, you know, the person that ends up with that water should have to have that responsibility. And so we have taken that responsibility and taken it very seriously, and we don't put that on anybody. We take that on our backs, and I appreciate Jack's and the lower district's energy towards that, and their push towards making sure that happens. I congratulate you on your bill, and also on all the things that go through with that, because it needs to happen. The revegetation needs to happen, so we don't have the blowing dirt and the blowing dust. But it's not an easy thing. It's hard, and we've lived through that. So, and when we're talking about interruptible supply, we're talking about 3 and 10. We're talking about 5 and 10. Those are things that Aurora is jumping into and trying. It's also things that it's also a space that we have worked in for the past 20 years. In 2004, 2005, we did a successful lease program underneath the Highline Canal, and it successfully put the city back into a good space. We were hurting, and we needed water, and boy, there's a lot of farmers in this room that stepped up and said, hey, we'll be a part of this program, and I think it was successful on both sides. We had a lot of participation. We had a lot of farmers that were a part of that program, and I think it was a success on both sides. But a lot of things have to fall into place for that to happen, and so through that period and through that time, Aurora signed agreements that limit our participation in what we can do in the Arkansas Basin. And so we're trying to live within those rules. We're trying to live within that space. And there are things that we're learning now that we need to make sure that are part of those programs. And I'm sure lessons will be learned even going forward. But the cooperation and the partnership, the listening to farmers and hearing what their needs are and what their fears are, and how we can be a part of their success. That's what we're trying to do, and we're trying to create a partnership, create some situations and programs that we can partner with farmers that need that help, and also the city needs the help as well. And so we look for those win-win situations and those win-win programs and ways to share water with this valley. This valley needs that water, and needs to, a lot of that water needs to stay here. That water needs to continue to, and you send food to the cities. That's what we do from down here. We send food to the cities, and yet there are a lot of benefits that come to the city, to this valley from the cities as well. Things like when you need a hospital, when you need when you have a young child that needs Children's Hospital or Anschutz or St. Jude, it's there, and the cities provide those things, and we have to look at those kinds of partnerships that can keep those things in place for this valley, for rural Colorado, and the jobs that provides take some water, and so I think the partnerships are the key to making these things move forward.
Kim, if Mike says that you're not necessarily consulting the right people and that he's not sure that water can be taken out and the land can still be productive in the future, what's your response? What do you feel like you've consulted the right people?
I wrote down, like when we started, you guys had some things up there that was flashing. I thought it was very interesting. It was Colorado is running out of water, but no ideas, right? I think was the quote that you had on there.
No, actually our phrase for a project that we're going to be launching for the next year is Colorado is running out of water, not running out of ideas.
Oh, not running out of ideas.
So our whole point is to work on stories about solutions, who's doing their share, who's doing their part to conserve water. Our farmers doing enough to conserve water. Our city's doing enough to conserve water. Everybody in between, so.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think on that theme, right, it's the ideas. I mean, we have to look, I mean, I would look at every one of these faces and I can tell there's some agitation out there, maybe some folks who are interested in what we have to say, and some that are absolutely like, not one more drop for the cities. Others are like, we want to work with the cities. And so we may not check everybody's boxes, but we do have to talk to as many people as we can, for sure. And I think where it really comes down to is, we in the past, these kinds of things would have just been based on a contract and dollars. Someone would have gone out and bought what was ever available, And so we learned that that doesn't work. And so we've been working over the last, 20 years, decade to bring in that science. And is it perfect science? Probably not. There's a lot of noise in the science right now, a lot of things we have to tease out and understand, because I can guarantee you we can't predict the weather in a month from now. We may not be able to predict exactly everything that's going to happen with retiring agricultural lands, restoring agricultural lands, or how that all works in an ecosystem, right? There's things that we have to work through and understand. And so I would ask Mike back, is doing nothing better than just try to build these things and get the monitoring and the science and try to move things forward in a better direction?
Yeah, so there is some science there, and that's what I say. You didn't really, I think, do a due diligence and consult with the science and consult with the people that are doing the soil science and the studies and the economic studies. You spend a lot of time doing promotional videos. You spend a lot of time having a nice name for it, and I give you credit for doing some of this stuff and trying something different, but you've got to do the hard science. You've got to put it through the lens of water quality. You've got to put it through the lens of economics. You've got to put it through the lens of soil science. And those are tough things to do, because it's not a comfortable situation for municipalities to do that, because they have to share the same risk farmers do. If you want to make these things successful, you've got to be able to take on the same risks. And I think that's what really is the biggest problem here, is that municipalities aren't able to wanting to take on the same risks that farmers are. If you offered farmers a good, decent price to fallow their land, say, $1,200 or $1,500 an acre to fallow 10% of your land, and whether every year, they would be able to do that. I think you'd have farmers lined up from here to Kansas to be part of that.
But isn't the Bent County agreement doing part of that with center pivot irrigation, where you leave the core? And we can explain that more for people who haven't heard of it. But leaving the corners dry and using the water that would have been used in the corners, for the cities can take that water, take that percentage.
But
isn't that the idea?
That's part of it. But that's only part of it. That is a start, I see, as part of it. But they're not mitigating both the economic impacts fully. That's still thousands of acres that are going to be leaving, thousands of acre feet going to be leaving the county. They're not fully mitigating not only the direct economic impact, but the opportunity what that water can produce in the future. They're not doing the other, the water quality. They're changing water in a very different location that has an impact on everybody from its origins to where it's eventually used. And so, it's partway there, but it's not in full. And until those are fully vetted, it kind of loses some of its luster.
Jack, you hear from farmers who don't necessarily want to be told what to do with their water. Mike sounds like he wants a lot more restrictions on it, but for a lot of farmers, it's the best asset they've got. If their kids aren't going to continue farming, they need to sell the water to have a family legacy. So what do farmers tell you about how much they want Denver to get involved in all this stuff?
Well, I moved my mic down, so can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I think I'm good. I just had some feedback. Well, first of all, they don't want Denver telling them what to do. So that would be the short answer. But when it comes to water, as most of us know, it's a private property right, and you have the ability to buy and sell it. And our position at the district is we're not going to stand in the way of that. But that's not the whole story. Most farmers, I would venture to guess, want to farm. They want to be able to, they don't want to have to take crop insurance. They don't want to have these subsidies. They just want to farm and make a profit. And, it's a hard lifestyle, but a really good lifestyle. So what we've seen is typically, you look historically, and farmers either sold their farm and their water, in your example where maybe there's not a kid that wants to come back and do it, they'll sell it to a neighbor farm. And it's still in production, it still benefits the local economy and everything that comes with that. But then there's also the case where you have difficult situations. You know, you look back in our history in the valley, and water was sold typically whenever there was a big stressor of some sort, either terrible crop prices or extended drought or whatever, and they've got, you know, the banker breathing down their neck, and it's just a struggle. So they cash out, but typically most farmers would rather just farm. What we've tried to do is, knowing that we can't purchase all the water ourselves at the district, that was I think maybe some of the first steps they took back in '02 when we were formed, and realized our little budget's not going to make it very far buying water. And so we thought, and again, it's not the silver bullet solution, but we've got different tools through conservation easements and different things, but we've become a proponent of leasing, and at a max of 3 out of 10 years, or a max of 30% each and every year, which I would prefer. And we've heard from farmers they prefer, because then, like Mike's saying, you're riding the hydrology wave with the cities. But they can still capitalize on that resource, but keep their communities whole as well. And the way that we've said it before is, why sell the cow once when you can sell the milk over and over again? Now, you know, from the city's perspective, and correct me if I'm wrong, but they would rather own it because they have control, they have the surety, and so finding that middle ground has been difficult. But we're going to continue to push to try to find that middle ground to where leasing is how it's going to happen. Because without that, you know, our cities will, or our communities will die at the rate that the Front Range grows.
Okay, so I want to make sure we get some of the questions that have come in from the audience. We've got some great questions. There's about 10, 15 minutes left. Make sure that y'all put your cards down the aisle to Dana or to somebody else who's raising their hand if you have more that you want to answer or get answered here. And remember, first person who's courageous enough to stand up and ask the question themselves, we have Twizzlers available in extra packets. This question is kind of basic, kind of challenging, and very important. How much additional water do Colorado Springs and Aurora need? Do they need to keep coming back to the valley or to other river basins in Colorado for growth? Kim, you all had a big decision within the last year about a big annexation that didn't happen. Part of that was about water resources, but it was a lot of other issues as well in terms of whether the city residents wanted to grow that much. But certainly water was a part of that. Rick and Kim, if you could answer, try to keep it short because we do have other questions, but do you all need more water from this area?
So our planning looks at, you know, a 50-year horizon, and with growth, there is water needs for the undeveloped acres of the city. And so our plan has been to work on the projects that we are working on now, which there's about, I want to say 5,000 to 7,000 acre feet of projects that we have here in the lower Arkansas. But we're also working on a storage project up in the Alma area. And we once we kind of get a handle on those, get through water court, get all of those permits in place and are moving forward, we're actually going to redo our long-range planning and reassess. Because we think with the demands that we have now, the climate pressures, the pressures in the lower valley, we're really planning on kind of coming down and working with county commissioners, the community, to actually hear what those pressures and risks are, so we can get a better handle on what maybe that future really looks like. I think we do have a lot of shared risks when it comes to climate and hydrology and what that looks like. Colorado Springs is part of the basin, and we water manage with ag, we water manage with recreation, and we think that's a much more tied future. And so we want to be able to work with everyone to really make that assessment and ask our leadership the hard questions. Are we resource limited? What do we do if we develop more? How do we keep the source water areas whole as we do that, so that we're actually working more in partnership? So I don't have a clear-cut answer on how much more. I think we have to kind of go through that planning. Our goal is to have our customers be very conservative, to look and use water wisely. And we want to be a partner in the basin as well, as that changes over time. So as those transformations are happening, we can leverage each other's partnerships to get us to where we need to go. And so I'm always asking, and I've asked Jack many times, what is your vision for ag, so that we can put that into the story.
Yeah, so happy to hear that you guys are looking to reconsider your water resources plan, because what it says is that Colorado Springs needs 34,000 acre feet of additional water if they don't annex one more square inch. That's why we were pushing back so hard last year on those annexations, is because that water has not been secured. And so we're adding to the future debt when we don't even have that secured. And then if you look at El Paso County's water master plan, it's 59,000 acre feet. And so happy to hear those are being reconsidered, because as we know, well, I would make the statement, there's likely no more water coming from the west slope. There may be a little bit of storage that you can create to capture additional yield, but no new water would be my strong guess. And so there's really no other place to come for the water. I think the cities have done a good job. I think there's around conservation, there's probably still room to improve there. But those are the numbers that we referenced directly out of those reports. And you know, acre feet is kind of foreign language to a lot of people. Us on the stage probably, you know, we say that word every day. But what does that mean in acres? So if you assume like let's just use the Fort Lyon Canal, because that's where Colorado Springs is looking to purchase water right now, or they are purchasing water. You might get an acre foot per acre that comes off of that field at the farm, but there's losses to move it upstream. So if you say 15 or 20%, you know, you can figure out pretty quick that 34,000 acre feet's a lot of acres. Now again, Colorado Springs tells me over and over, it's not all coming from the lower valley. We're doing it in other ways too, but I would say likely most of it will. And so that's our concern, is to try to figure out, okay, how is this going to look? Because again, like I said earlier, we can't stop this, but can we do it in a way where there's proper mitigation and our communities aren't sacrificed for the growth of theirs? And so
I would say as far as Aurora goes,
Yeah, I'm glad we need Rick's answer on this, because we're putting Kim on the spot a lot. But Rick, do you all need more water from the valley in Aurora?
Our perspective on this is, you know, the city has a planning horizon and you know, it is looking for our build out, and yet we have taken steps. We've just recently greatly shrunk our, you know, reduced the size of our planning boundary of where we're going to of who we're going to serve. And it doesn't mean that the metro area is not going to grow because we have done that, but it does mean that we're trying to be responsible in how we look at the water that we have and how we look at the water that we need. And so as far as Aurora goes in the Arkansas Basin, I think we have a very defined plan. It's been defined by IGAs and been defined by agreements that Aurora has in place. And so we're going to try to develop those water sources that have been that we've paid for and have been promised. And but we're not looking at going beyond that. And we're also looking at those sources to be drought recovery. That's what we're looking in the project that we're doing right now, the farm project that we're doing right now. It's drought recovery. It's something that will help the cities rebound, and the rest of the time it will be an ag, and we're going to make sure that those farms that we have are successful and producing.
There's a few questions in the theme here about growth and whether the cities are willing to limit growth in order to leave water where it is in the rest of the state. Kim, can we talk a little bit about what happened with that last annexation vote? Sorry, I'm picking on you again. Because you guys did have this big annexation to do. What's going to happen next with that particular one? Or is there another big development coming up in Colorado Springs that you all are going to be accounting for, need to be accounting for in your water?
So, I mean, growth is one of those, I think, tension type conversations for sure. And how do you strike balance is kind of a good question. Can I take a quick poll of the audience on like how many people like regulation, I guess? I hear a lot of laughter, but I mean, I don't think there is a value challenge here, and a lot of it is based in regulation. And I think one of this is probably a state conversation. We could have a regulation that says only X amount of water can come out of ag, right? We could have regulation that says cities are capped at a certain amount of water use. But we have this value set against, that challenges that around the economy, private property rights, and other, institutions that make that a very hard question to ask. I'm not saying it shouldn't be asked. I'm just saying, how does it get asked? And what is the policy values that we need to actually balance? Because I think Jack would have a perspective on that. I think the cities have a perspective on that. And the people within cities are still people, and they all come with values. And I think Jack's up there when we were doing that annexation, talking about how that annexation might impact the lower district. And our citizens responded, they denied that through a vote. So those values are, I think, throughout our region, they're throughout the state, but how do you set a limit on those? Probably through some really difficult conversations, and unfortunately, regulation, which ultimately we may not accept.
Okay, I'm going to throw Kim, because I've been picking on you a lot, a little bit of a lifeline here. Statistic you mentioned in another talk that we were on together, and tell me if I have the numbers right, but Colorado Springs is actually using 20% less water from about 20 years ago, 2000, something like that,
Yes.
with 92% growth
Correct.
in population.
It's about right.
So you can say that Colorado Springs and Aurora are growing too much. You can make that argument, but you can't say they haven't done a little bit. So, Mike or Jack, either one of you, do you want Colorado Springs and Aurora to stop growing? You want their population to be capped?
Sure. What I look at is this: we want to develop a trust, and what I look at is how can we, as in rural communities, have trust when their own citizens don't trust them? Colorado Springs, if they were to go to vote and say, hey, should we, in addition to the 50,000 acres you dried up in Crowley County, is it okay if we dry up 30,000 more acres in Bend County to have growth? If that went to a public vote in Colorado Springs, the people who are paying for it, the people that you guys are supposed to be representing, what do you think the outcome of that vote would be? And so that's where my concern is, that there's a big policy, and nobody wants to take responsibility. I'm not blaming Kim or Rick on that, because, I'm just doing my job. I have to go get water. And, the economic development people say, I'm just doing my job. I need to get primary jobs. So nobody takes responsibility. The problem is we're paying the price for it down here, and we have the same opportunity to do that, whether it be in agriculture or businesses, and they're leveraging their population to take that opportunity away from us and for the future generations, and that's where I have a concern. So we can stack up the justifications a mile high, but ultimately they're taking away and using the leverage in their citizens' resources for something they don't even want. And So.
Jack, go ahead. Hey, I just want to also remind the audience, and we do want people to come up to the microphone, but also remember that people came a long way to be on the panel, and they're putting their time out there. We asked them to do it. They're here as not only information for you, but guests of the Colorado Sun. So we do appreciate them standing in the fire, answering the questions. So let's remember that as we ask more questions. But Jack, take on that question. Your farmers don't want a cap on what they do. Why should we cap growth in the city?
So I'll say what I said when we were up there testifying all last year and the year before to Colorado Springs City Council. We don't care how they grow, but we start caring when it starts killing our communities. So there's got to be a way where you can grow within a certain amount. I'm glad Kim said limited resources, because I think that's a real conversation that needs to happen in these cities, because let's just play it out a lot of years. Well, eventually you're going to run out of water anyway. So what are you going to do then? When you grow all the way out even further. And I appreciated a comment from City Council member Hingham whenever the petition was successful and made it back to them, and City Council had already voted to approve this annexation, Carmen Line, and they had the choice, do we kill it or do we send it to the voters? And she made a comment that she said, we're the canary in the coal mine here in the West. This is not just Colorado Springs that's dealing with this water resource issue. And she said, I think at some point it's important for us to have a conversation about our carrying capacity, because it's not an unlimited resource. And so I guess I wouldn't say I want them to stop growing completely. I just don't want them to keep sucking out of our communities in a way that's detrimental to us.
Rob, I want to get you back in the conversation in terms of, Mike talked about people voting. They wouldn't vote for certain things. People did vote commissioners in. Do county commissioners, is there a way for the counties here to group together in a way that gives them enough political power or enough legal power, even if it's just a matter of raising enough money to hire better lawyers, to sign better contracts, to fight back more, to sue over broken compacts? Or is there more that commissioner level can do?
Oh, I don't know that there's a lot more. We don't have the resources, we don't have the funding to be able to, go a long distance with suing and that kind of stuff. I think the biggest thing is we want to, as county, we want to work together with them. We want to do the best that we can to keep the county whole. I appreciate you say that, because that's what it's all about. I've never been a farmer. I don't really understand that, but I lived it, because as being a plumber my whole life, I worked for all of them. And I saw it from the time they were all green and productive until now it's just weeds and dirt. And we need to work together. And as a county commissioner, it's my job to make sure that the county stays whole. When water's taken, it's our job to make sure that the county stays in a situation that they are, because we don't have a lot of extra money. And whenever water leaves, it's going to affect the county. It's going to affect our base, it's going to affect our economy, it's going to affect everything. So it's up to us. I hope that we can work out a situation where I really like Jack said, I like the 30%. I think that if they take 30% a year, at least there's always water on the land. Then the land can always be vegetated and it can always stay. When you talk about the 3 and 10 and the 5 and 10, if you take it for 3 or 4 years, that land's probably not going to be worth anything by the time you get water on it again, or it's going to be so tough to do anything with it. And then by the time you do, they're ready to take the water off it again. So with me, it's just the idea of working together and working to make sure that the county stays whole.
Okay, just got handed the question, where or what is the tipping point? And you all just touched on that just now. Jack, you mentioned you're not sure how much water you can squeeze out of that stone in terms of people's growth. Is there more conservation that can be done? I mean, you guys have come a long way. Aurora's done a lot in terms of recycling water, reusing water. Thornton had to meet a large number of conservation requirements before it could start finishing its pipeline that they're now building to bring the water down from the Pooter. Is there still a lot more that can be done on conservation in cities?
I thought you were going to ask Jack a question.
Yes.
So I think where we end up going is probably more that reuse, indirect potable reuse, kind of direction, storage. You know, if we call our portfolio the balanced portfolio because generally we need conservation, we need reuse, we need storage, and then there would be a supply component to that. And so if we get less of one, we have to do more of another. And so from the conservation perspective, we are looking at changing, say, rate structures to squeeze more out of the conservation. We have a goal of an additional 8,000 to 10,000 acre feet of reduced demand over the period of our planning. So yes, there is still a lot of conservation to try to go for, but that's going to be harder and harder every time we get a big chunk, right? So that's when storage needs to kind of come in and that reuse. And I think the challenge, though, is as we reuse more, we actually have to potentially not collaborate as much on some of our leases and other things. We have to keep it tighter and tighter to the city, and that becomes a little less of a resource potentially that we've used in the past for the agricultural leases when we have that surplus. So it's kind of striking that balance, and why we want to continue to talk. If we're building supplies, is there a mechanism in there that we also keep kind of an agricultural relationship going in a permanent kind of manner?
Okay, Jack, where do you think cities can use less water?
So that's not my expertise. I think there's some easy things to point at, especially in years like this when, a farmer's deciding, how am I going to keep this business operational? How am I going to pay my bills? How am I going to feed my family with a lack of water? Where I think, in my opinion, that's a much higher priority than can I water my lawn this week? So I'm sure there's more you can do there. If it's all right, I'd like to talk about conservation and ag a little bit, if I might.
If we just got a question on that too, so you go first, and then I'll ask this question about different kinds of crops. But go ahead.
Yeah, this is a good opportunity for me to clear up a misnomer that I'm going to pick on Colorado Springs a little bit. When you hear the word efficiency, what does that mean? So if you get an efficient shower head, apparently that's me, you're doing the same job with less water, right? Well, in the ag space, when you hear irrigation efficiency, it's the exact opposite. So irrigation efficiency, simply put, is of the amount of water you put onto a field, how much do you consume? And consume means pull it out of the system. So it's going into the crops, into the sky, through evaporation, transpiration. So simple numbers. Let's say you're in a flood irrigation system and you've got 60% efficiency, and you put a sprinkler in, now you're 80% efficient or higher. Well, there's 20% there, but that's not saved. That's additional consumption. And so, whenever Colorado Springs says, we're putting in pivots, we're saving water. Well, it's the exact opposite, because now we also have this set of rules called the irrigation efficiency rules. Folks that are in the farm world understand them as Rule 10 plans, but our state implemented these rules, and mainly it was because of our compact with Kansas, that whenever you put an irrigation improvement in, like a sprinkler, you have a potential of consuming more water. And so you've got to pay that back to the river with another source of water. And so you're not saving at all. You're really creating an obligation on the farmer's behalf. And actually, a lot of those farms that are in that Colorado Springs water sharing plan actually have come to us and say, hey, can we join your Rule 10 plan? but they come with a ton of water we've got to find, and we just can't support them. And so I just think that's an important misnomer that's been put out there, is there's some savings with these sprinklers and drip systems and whatever. It's exact opposite. You're creating a debt that you've got to come up with additional water to pay back to the river. So,
Okay, let me follow up on that with a question from the audience, and reminder that at coloradosun.com, these are exactly the kind of things we're going to be taking on in the next year in our solutions journalism project. First story we're going to be doing in the first week of June is going to be about if you're asking agriculture to make more savings, where can that be done? Can you grow something different? And that's one of the questions we just got. Can you grow a different kind of crop that uses less water, sell the rest of the water to the city? So we've been having conversations with CSU people, with farmers on the Western Slope. Black-eyed peas uses a lot less water. There aren't a lot of people buying black-eyed peas at the moment. That's the problem. There are alternatives. Alfalfa uses a ton of water, and there are city people who will say, why are we exporting water in the form of alfalfa bales to Texas to feed dairy cattle? That doesn't seem right either. If you want to argue with the cities about too much growth, what are we doing with alfalfa? Is there an alternative to alfalfa? So, for the farming experts on the panel, Mike, let's start with you. Could we grow a lot of something that uses a lot less water and let the cities use the savings?
Yeah. So I hear that a lot. It's like, why are we growing stuff that feeds cows to grow meat? And what my solution to that, the first thing we should do is go into Colorado Springs and Aurora, shut down every restaurant that serves beef, every McDonald's, start there, have them do soy burgers, and then you'll see these guys growing soybeans. So let's start there.
To be fair, some of it goes to dairy cattle. There's a surplus of dairy in the United States, so it's complicated.
Yeah.
Yes,
But
I eat hamburgers. I love hamburgers, and I wasn't making that argument for myself.
Yeah.
Is there an alternative to alfalfa that's legitimate, that could save a lot of water, and that we could redistribute the water that way?
It all depends on, and the reasons are crops we grow and the markets are developed because that's what the economics steered us to. So if there's, farmers are amazingly adaptive, but they have to have the markets. They incur so many risks as it is. And unless there's a market for them, you can't expect them to just switch to a crop when there's no processing for it, no other things for it. So these are the reason they're growing alfalfa, because it helps spread out some of their risk. They're not all going to grow melons. Yeah, they can't grow all melons. So it's very difficult, and these things have to be market driven, and the farmers understand that, but it's also have to be risk management. And that's where I go back to this solution, that if we truly had cooperative agreements where cities would share in that risk, where they would lease 10% of the water, the farmers then would help alleviate some of and give them a set price, regardless if there's a yield from it or not. So treat that water just like any other crop, but give them a set price for that crop. You would start seeing farmers investing in new equipment, new crops, new processing, but you have to minimize that risk and help them share in that risk. Without that, there's not going to be a major movement in the cropping patterns.
Kim and Rick, is there room for cities to share in the risk in a more expansive way?
I think absolutely. I think that we put some of those ideas forward. Worked with Super Ditch and Jack 2 or 3 years ago, trying to put together a program that would share risk. We had a set price, and we had a shared risk price. And I think it was imperfect. It was not something that we ended up being successful at, but it was something that we tried and looked at that shared risk. And I think we are constantly looking for ways that we can share in the risk and share share some of that, share equally in some of that risk. So I believe that there is a place for that. I believe that we can find some solutions there, and I think we're working hard at doing some of those things.
Again, if anybody wants to come down the microphone and talk, we have a couple more questions, but also we're getting, even though we started a little bit late, we're already at 7:15 and we want to be respectful of the theater's time and everybody else's time. So we will be wrapping it up soon. Great.
Can we keep the Twizzlers?
Got somebody else we can give it to?
Fourth generation farmer here. My main question was one that you already covered. If you guys are willing to deter people from coming to your communities. You talked about caps a little bit ago on your growth. And Wyatt out here, he talked about caps, what kind of caps we have on agriculture. We can't sod bust. And one of the points, this thing.
That's okay. You're good.
What do you, on your panel here, it says, it talks a lot about sharing. So in the event of a lease or a buy and dry or whatever you guys are going to do, if you guys have a surplus, there's been no talk about sharing that. Is that something that you guys would consider? You know, I know Aurora's bought the Diamond A farm recently. There wasn't any talk about sharing any of that or opportunities for any farmers to farm any of that. So it kind of seems, from our perspective, it seems a little one-sided. And as far as the caps go, you know, we have to adhere to compacts with Kansas. You know, we can't store water for longer than 72 hours in our retention ponds. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of things that we have to adhere to that it seems like you guys don't. A lot of transfers going up down the river. You know, there's just a lot of stuff going on that there's a lot of rumblings amongst my community that I feel like aren't being addressed on your community side.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Who wants to take that one on?
Well, I guess a short answer, you know, is yes, we do try to, we do lease back when we have surplus. For an example, last year we leased back 10,000 acre feet to augmentation companies. The year before that was 20,000 acre feet. So there is that that we provide in our water management portfolio. And I think one of the things we try to do as far as sharing the risk is to buffer the risk, and that's through shared storage or projects that we can do with others where we have kind of multi-purpose storage. So we are always looking for those opportunities to build that in to the projects as well. And so, you know, that's a short answer since we're running out of time, I guess.
I think, yeah, talk about leasing back. Aurora does do that, and a lot of times, I mean, we have a program that leases back water to a continued farming group that we've helped develop new water source to, and we continue. We're starting our third 10-year water sharing agreement with them, and provide them with very low-cost water. And in the beginning, we gave it back to them, and now we provide it back at a very low cost. But and as far as our new farm, we're not sharing that water because all of that water is going back to agriculture right now. It's being farmed as it has been, and it's exactly where it was. And we're trying to develop how the best way to use some of that water in drought recovery will be, and part of that has been talked about by Rob and Jack in changing maybe some of our approaches and trying to change maybe some of our IGAs to incorporate a 30% rather than a 3 and 10, and that brings consistency, that brings more assurity to the farmers, and it could very well be the way that we need to do that in the future, and we're exploring those ideas and trying to develop farmer-friendly ideas and farmer-friendly programs moving forward. Yes.
Okay, so we're gonna take one more audience question. Steph, we should probably wrap it up. Okay, And then we'll thank the panelists and appreciate all of you coming out.
Real quick, Ryan Wayner, new farmer pretty much. But question was, with that new purchase of the new farm you guys for Aurora, some of the older land that you guys purchased, the dry up land you said you guys do graze and lease, none of that is, you do not pay property tax on any of that. That's all property tax exempt. So that's more money taken away from the Otero County. And then my question is now with this new purchase of you guys, do you guys have any plan to make sure that that stays tax, like that we all pay taxes here? And just because Aurora now comes down here, they're like, oh, we'll take your water and we're not going to pay you. Like, that's kind of chicken shit.
Yeah, and Aurora has, Aurora does pay a payment in lieu of tax. So the lands that Aurora owns and the lands that Aurora doesn't own, but has has revegetated, we pay the difference between what the property owner pays now and what farm ground would be. We make up that difference to Otero County. In the lands that Aurora owns, we pay a payment in lieu of tax. Yeah, the city isn't taxed, but we make up that difference to the county. In our new purchase, we are, that is absolutely the goal, to make it a zero impact to the county as far as property tax goes, and that's exactly where we'll be.
Okay, one last quick question. Sorry, Steph, and we're going to make it quick.
Yeah, I'll be really quick. I just, you talked about the lease backs. So something that's not been talked about, and I would like to ask the water people and the city people to each answer this question. What is the quality of water that is given to the cities, and what is the quality of water that goes back to the farming communities? Can you classify that quality of water?
And so the image in people's heads from Mike Sweeney's presentation, the confluence of Fountain Creek and the main stem of the Arkansas, it's a pretty dramatic difference. So it'd be great if each of you could talk a little bit about that. What are you doing to improve water quality or at least preserve what we've got?
Start. You want me to start?
I know Mike has a lot to say about water quality.
To
but
me,
can you keep it short,
this is kind of an injustice that I've seen been going on for years. They're taking water that has 10 times the salt content, all kinds of other impurities that they're actually buying, and they're exchanging it, in the case of Aurora, for something that has 10%. That water is needed to dilute out the contaminants that are coming down the river. Water gets increasingly full of TDS or salinity as it progresses down there. About at Avondale, it exceeds the threshold for crop injury. So right about Avondale, when you start the river, you reach the thresholds that cause injury. So they're taking out this water, they're increasing the concentration of the TDS, and we're all paying or subsidizing that exchange by a decrease in crop productivity and crop yields. And I don't think people understand that because it's fairly small. It would be 10, 20, 30, maybe $50 an acre, depending on the crop. But everybody is subsidizing. In order for them to actually use the water that they own, just imagine the cost of that would be for them to build a $1 billion pipeline, hundreds of millions of dollars to treat it, and so we're actually having to subsidize that. And so that's something that's never been addressed throughout the year. And this is something that's not new, folks. The cities and everybody else have known this for decades, and they've never really addressed that. And I think we're at the point now where that's just an injustice that we should not be handing out to our future generations to deal with. And so I see that as one of the biggest injustices that we have here in Colorado, is dealing with that, and particularly when you're dealing with Fountain Creek, which is one of the most contaminated, waterways in the country in terms of its E. coli and other pathogens, selenium and other things that this basin already has an issue with. And so, yeah, I think that's something that needs to be addressed, and we never talk about it.
Okay. lightning round for the other four of you if you want to address that question. Just go quick. Jack, you want to say?
Yeah, I think Dr. Bartolo hit it on the head. I mean, there's water being purchased, by Colorado Springs around Los Animas. And as we know, well, if you don't know, the water in Leadville is much cleaner and it degrades as it goes downstream. Naturally, that occurs. And so there's water being bought in Los Animas, but Colorado Springs will take it at Pueblo Reservoir or Twin Lakes and pump it into their system. And it doesn't take a genius to figure out if you keep pulling clean water out of a system that would have otherwise gone downstream, you don't get the dilution effect. And like Mike says, everybody else suffers. Aurora, similar situation, except that water is leaving and we get no return flows. In Colorado Springs case, we get return flows, and I'm sure that they're within state and federal compliance out of their wastewater treatment plant. But I'd venture to guess that water quality coming back is not what they pulled off. So there's kind of a compounding effect that the rest of us have no choice but to deal with downstream.
Well, so you're correct. So our replacement is the return flows that come from our wastewater treatment plant. And of course, wastewater treatment plants have very stringent regulations. And they're actually nearing drinking water standards to the point where direct potable reuse may be in the future for those. And so that's fairly clean water, relatively, from Fountain Creek. And so it's a lot of the environmental conditions that cause a lot of water quality concerns. So as those are picked up from non-point sources through kind of the natural sediments and other kind of geologic kind of conditions. And so the picture is bigger than I think what we tend to hear in the news or the kind of some of the partial information. And so we really try to collect the data. Like Fountain Creek is the second most monitored creek in the nation. And so it is being watched, it's being kind of studied and trying to be understood as far as its connection to the water quality picture in the Arkansas Basin. And I think it's kind of, again, a question as far as, we have to have the data, we have to look at the data and make decisions moving forward. And it's kind of looking at the big picture as well, all sources in that picture. We are one component in that story.
Rick, want to add anything about quality issues?
Yeah, Aurora's very interested in water quality. We partner with Lower and Southeast and others in looking at that all the time. We are looking for the science, and I think that we do want to make sure that the water quality is the water quality that it needs to be when it comes to agriculture and when it comes to farming. The return flows that we get, that are part of any change case are return flows that were always here, and so those are left in the river, and that's the lifeblood of the Arkansas River is those return flows, and they're left in the river. And yes, there are some water quality issues, and those things need to be addressed, and we want to be a part of that conversation.
I think, I truly believe that it's getting to the point that it's as big a thing with the water quality as it is the quantity of water. You look at those pictures. Pictures tell the whole story. You saw how the water was coming out of the Fountain Creek and how it was coming out of the Arkansas. It was a whole different situation. And I think that needs to be something that really is worked on, because the quality of water is getting worse and worse all the time.
Well, thanks everybody for hanging out for this long. It's amazing to see all these faces still here after such a long time. We really thank you for coming out. We thank our panelists. The questions are difficult. We hope that if you hold them afterward, that you are as respectful as you have been here and as interested. And we thank you all for spending your time on a Thursday night, which I'm sure you have other things to do to make the drive out here to have this conversation with us.
Well, and thanks to the Colorado Sun for putting this on.
Yeah.